Watching all the Underconsumption Core videos, realizing you've just lived in poverty your whole life.
I only have one necklace, one mascara, one concealer, one lipstick, one bronzer.
I just find it hilarious because it's just another thing that poor people have been doing their entire lives.
I don't care that cream products expire in a year, whatever. I'm gonna use this until it's done.
I never knew my poverty-stricken life would ever constitute as trendy, sustainable, minimal living, but here we are. Since one of my last videos was all about the craziest overconsumption on the internet, I think it's time for us to take a look at the complete opposite of overconsumption, which is underconsumption. Underconsumption is where you consume fewer resources and purchase fewer goods. You only buy what you need and you make do with what you already have. Underconsumption Core actually became a bit of a trend around 2024. Yes, I am 2 years late to this conversation. I apologize. But this trend came around because people were getting so sick of overconsumption culture that they started to post content showcasing their underconsumption to try and denormalize overconsumption. However, the underconsumption trend did receive its fair share of criticism, including claims that underconsumption is just a fancy way of saying poverty core and cosplaying the poor.
Underconsumption Core. This is my great-grandmother's hairbrush from 1960. It's been passed down through 4 generations of women. Somehow, it's still in perfect condition, so I'm gonna keep using it. I only have one necklace. My mom bought it 20 years ago. I don't need to buy another necklace because I already have one that I love so much, and that's more than enough.
So, as I said, we are now looking at the complete opposite of overconsumption. One hairbrush that's been passed down through generations, owning one necklace.
I have 5 pairs of period underwear. Over the next 30 years, I'll only go through about 50 pairs of period undies instead of 9,000 pads or tampons. That's insane.
There's also a big focus on avoiding the use of single-use products too.
This is my daily skincare. Natural, simple ingredients. I keep my makeup really simple. One mascara, one concealer, one lipstick, one bronzer. Somebody recommended me this bronzer and honestly, I do not like it. But I'm still gonna use it until it runs out because why waste?
And doing Project Pan is of course a big part of underconsumption. Using up your products before buying more and using up those products even if you don't like them that much.
I have a hot take. Underconsumption, more interesting. It's cooler. Let me show you. You know what's fun? Secondhand furniture like this and this and this and this. Cat is technically secondhand too. You know what's cool? Reusing pasta jars. Underconsumption, cool. You know what has better decor than Target? Thrift shops, vintage shops, Mother Earth. Thrifted, dried eucalyptus, a little flower in a jar, got dried flowers. You know what's also cool? Trying hobbies, focusing on being, not consuming. Who do you want to be instead of what do you want to have? Just a thought. Overconsumption, not cool. And it's also destroying the planet. So let's take a step back. Let's chill a little bit, consume less. Underconsumption. It's cooler.
Focusing on who you want to be instead of what do you want to have. I do think that a lot of people use consumption for happiness. It's the shopping dopamine rush that we talked about in the blind box video a couple months back. Shopping and buying things makes people happy. And I know at one point I tried to fill the void by buying things. I thought that having a constant stream of nice new material possessions would expand the value of my existence. It did not. Well, it expanded my physical existence and nothing more. And it took me a while to realize that who you are and what you have are two very separate things. You are not what you own. So who are you when you take all of that away?
Underconsumption Core. I do not like variety when it comes to makeup. I basically do the same makeup look like every day. This is my only foundation and I don't own concealer. I've had this for 1.5 years and I've worn it basically every day. I don't care that cream products expire in a year, whatever. I'm gonna use this until it's done. I love this. This is both my lipstick and my blush. I've been using this same brow pencil since I was 14. I don't need another brow pencil because I love this one.
I think makeup routines have gotten so out of hand in the past few years. A full makeup routine now involves like 20 steps, and it's not even just the makeup, it's the skin prep before the makeup. There's primers for everything, there's color correctors, setting sprays. Underconsumption Core strips that right back to 4 or 5 products and that's it, which of course is the complete opposite of the crazy overconsumption makeup content that we're used to seeing.
I'm convinced that a part of maturing is just realizing that you really don't need much. That thing that you become obsessed with, it'll likely pass. Something else will come by and fill its place, and that you don't really need to acquire everything that you fall in love with. It's realizing that everything that you acquire, it becomes your responsibility to take care of it, to make it last as long as you can make it, and also its disposal. And to really feel the weight of that responsibility, it takes maturity for that. You don't need to also use items to express yourself day to day. Because every time you want to express something new, then you have to buy a new thing to be able to express that thing that you're feeling internally. But why do you need items? You don't need an item for that.
This reminds me of a video that I reacted to a long time ago where it was a creator who said, a lot of people don't understand that when you buy something, you have it. You own that item for life. It is your responsibility to store that item. It's your responsibility to look after that item. You are basically stuck with that item forever until you decide to get rid of it. And when you do decide to get rid of it, how are you going to get rid of it responsibly? How are you going to make sure that that doesn't end up in a landfill? These are the things that a lot of people don't think about when they buy things. One thing that I definitely struggled with in the past was going through phases of interests and buying things for the fandoms that I was in at the time. I would get really obsessed with something and I'd want to buy the merch for it. I got into K-pop and I wanted to buy all the albums for the photo cards. As I've matured, I recognize that I do go through phases a lot with my interests, so I have to remind myself that, like, you don't need to buy new stuff to represent everything that brings you happiness. I have to try to be content with the internal happiness that those things bring me instead of trying to extend that into my physical existence. You don't need to acquire everything that you fall in love with. However, with the rise of underconsumption content, the line between underconsumption and regular consumption gets a little bit blurred. Take a look at this video, for example.
Makeup under consumption. Let me show you guys what I have. I usually just have one of what I need. So in this case, I only have one bronzer, an older blush that I have, one highlighter, which is this Fenty one. I have one powder Chanel blush that is my most recent purchase that I love. I do have 3 Rhode products, but that's only because I'm experimenting and I just really love Rhode for the aesthetics mostly.
3 of the same Rhode products that you have because you're experimenting and because you like Rhode for the aesthetics. That is not underconsumption, in my opinion. I think this is looking a little bit more like regular consumption, but everyone will have their own opinions on what true underconsumption looks like. If you've been a crazy makeup overconsumer in the past, this size makeup collection might feel like underconsumption to you. It's all kind of subjective, but I do think that we are so used to seeing overconsumption on social media that smaller makeup collections like this start to look and feel like underconsumption in comparison to those. So people will use the word underconsumption to emphasize the fact that they aren't overconsuming, even when it's not always true underconsumption. We've also got underconsumption final boss videos on social media where people show off the items that they still use despite being really old or broken. I actually do really like these videos because I think that people so often forget that just because an item is slightly damaged doesn't make it completely useless. I think social media teaches us that we need new things every time something gets a little bit old or damaged, and even if you don't need new things, you should be run don't walking to get the newest things anyway. And that is a one-way ticket to overconsumption city, and we do not want to go to overconsumption city, okay? That's where the overconsumption final bosses live from my previous video. Even though this all seems like a wonderful change from the usual overconsumption slop content, underconsumption content isn't without its criticisms. Watching all the underconsumption core videos, realizing you've just lived in poverty your whole life. Underconsumption core is a fancy way of saying field trip poverty core. Even some of the underconsumption videos have more than I've ever had. Is it underconsumption, or do others just waste and spend so much that normal living is now seen as underconsumption? So some people feel that underconsumption core content is making a big deal out of things that they have already done because of their financial situation or the ways in which they were raised. And you'll notice that that is usually the top comment on any underconsumption discussion video. Underconsumption core, and it's literally how my life has always been. People with money always find a way to make our lives cute and trendy. I never knew my poverty-stricken life would ever constitute as trendy, sustainable, minimal living, but here we are. Imagine romanticizing someone's life they have no choice in. Overconsumption has been so normalized that many think that it's the base level, so everything below it is underconsumption, even if it should be normal and regular. Oh my gosh, you all are infuriating. The whole underconsumption trend is literally to stop overconsumption. What that means is that it's directed towards people who have drawers upon drawers filled of fast fashion and excessive amounts of things. Like, bro, yes, it's normal consumption, that's the thing. The underconsumption core trend is just broke living packaged up to be palatable.
This underconsumption trend is hilarious to me, not because I don't agree with the core principles of it, I do. It's more economical, it's good for the environment, it's more sustainable. But it's funny because this is how people that grew up with no money have been living their entire life. We were getting hand-me-downs from family members or family friends and buying things from secondhand shops, from charity shops, before it became cool to do that. We were using makeup that was probably at least a year out of date because it wasn't finished yet, so why would we replace it? Crazy to me that what is most people's norm has suddenly become a trend because we're so used to buying things for the sake of buying it just because an upgrade is out or because it's in fashion, it's in season. It's completely unfathomable to me that people can be so wasteful because we were not brought up to be that way. We couldn't afford to be that way. And I just find it hilarious because it's just another thing that poor people have been doing their entire lives, or working class people, normal people. It's not even necessarily just poor people. Normal people have been doing their entire lives, and suddenly it becomes a trend.
Agree with everything you've said. I find it a bit insulting, the rich preaching to me how to underconsume. Like, that has been my whole life, for my whole life. To be fair, I don't have a problem with it becoming a trend if it gets the message over, but it's probably just a passing phase for the overconsumers. The upsetting part is that so many people didn't realize until now that they were being wasteful. For those that haven't lived like this, it's handy to learn, especially if they've had a massive lifestyle change. I get what you're saying, but stop looking at the negative side of it. It's a healthy movement to embrace it because social media is flooded with rich people overconsuming, so let's romanticize it. And I do agree, that is what is at the heart of the underconsumption trend. People are making a big deal out of not overconsuming because of how much overconsumption has been normalized.
I know that Underconsumption Core is trending right now, and don't get me wrong, I am so stoked that repairing, buying less and using what we already have is finally getting the attention it deserves. However, we are collectively way too obsessed with cores and niches and aesthetics. I have noticed several videos labeled Underconsumption Core where people are just low-key throwing out their half-used things. That's the exact opposite of the point. So this is your daily reminder that sustainability is not an aesthetic, it is a method. It's not about making something look more sustainable, it's about consuming less in the first place. Because we can't really buy our way out of the climate crisis. We can't use the same mindset that got us here and expect it to solve the problem. But by all means, let's keep Underconsumption Core trending because I cannot literally see another Shein haul.
From what I understand, and from what a lot of these creators are talking about, I'm guessing that back in 2024, when Underconsumption Core did become a trend, there were a lot of people just kind of hopping on the trend and doing it as a trend. As this creator said, throwing away half-used things just because it's Underconsumption Core. The point isn't to throw your things away just so you can say, look, I'm doing Underconsumption Core. The point is to not buy too many things in the first place, to make do with what you have and to use up your stuff until it's finished. But there have been a lot of criticisms of turning underconsumption into a core and a trend, and I see this from both sides actually. I agree that being sustainable and not overconsuming shouldn't be a trend that comes and goes, and I do agree that calling it a core does sort of trivialize the whole thing a little bit, but I think the whole core thing is part of packaging things up for the modern day social media audience. Young people, Gen Z on the internet, are more likely to listen to something if you call it a core, if you call it a trend, if you call it an aesthetic. Not everyone, but I think it's fair to say that most young people on social media probably do. So I get that while calling it a core and a trend does kind of trivialize the whole thing and make it seem a little bit less serious than it should be, I think that using the words core and aesthetic and trend is part of the strategy to get young people on board and to get them listening. I think the whole point is to use the trend of core everything to attract attention to this much more ethical content. So of course, some people will use it inaccurately, but overall, I'm mostly seeing people use it to showcase a much more ethical lifestyle.
Everyone's saying that they don't get the underconsumption trend because that's just what normal life is like as like a low to middle class person. Yes, and it's also that you are not the target audience. I'm telling you this as someone who has been low class my entire life. The underconsumption trend exists entirely in opposition to overconsumption and influencer culture. Without it, it would not exist. Influencers are showing off closets staged to look like stores and PR hauls of 20 packages, makeup collections full of things that are going to expire before they can ever be used, etc. And having the newest thing is highly glamorous. It's something that many people aspire to have even when they can't afford it. And overconsumption is bad because it is killing the planet, but it's also bad because it's a financial waste. I have lived firsthand how overconsumption can so quickly spiral into hoarding. Because influencers are romanticizing overconsumption, it's just as important to start a movement to romanticize underconsumption, aka just living life normally like you should. Regardless, the trend exists for a reason. You just have to think about and understand why it exists.
This whole thing in general reminds me a lot of how I felt about Project Pan to begin with. If you've seen my previous video on Project Pan, you'll know what I'm talking about. TLDR, when I first started seeing people do Project Pan, I was like, like, I'm sorry, you guys weren't doing this already? For some of us, Project Pan is just how we live, and actually using up your things shouldn't be something that you have to do purposefully. Like, that should just be normal. But then I stopped and realized that I am not the target audience for Project Pan content. Project Pan exists because of overconsumption, and people post about Project Pan to normalize using your stuff before buying more. And I think that's the same as underconsumption content, as this creator said. Yes, there are plenty of people out there who are already underconsumers, and for some people, being an underconsumer is not a choice, it's not a trend, and it's definitely not an aesthetic. But if you are already an underconsumer, then you are not the primary target audience for underconsumption content. It's for people who need that mindset change in order to be less of an overconsumer. For me personally, the reason that I've never really fallen into overconsumption is because I didn't have the money to. When I got older and when I got adult money for the first time, I was absolutely tempted to overconsume. I was like, yeah, now I can buy everything. I can buy all the things that I want, I can buy all the trending items, and that's how I ended up with a lot of the things that I kind of regret buying. Everybody has their own experiences with having money and buying things. There are always going to be people out there choosing to overconsume. So for those people, choosing to consume less and choosing to be more eco-friendly and reduce waste is a choice. And I personally think that we should be happy that people are making that choice and they're promoting normal consumption, even if it does get a little bit mislabeled as underconsumption sometimes, because that all helps to de-influence people from overconsumption. Am I making sense here? I want to take a look at this video next, and it's been made in response to this comment. Isn't underconsumption not buying anything at all? The video description says, Underconsumption Core is just existing as a poor person, but made into a trend if we're being serious. I've lived under the poverty line my entire adult life, and I still have everything I need and more.
Underconsumption is seeing, oh, what shoes are we wearing this fall, come up 20 times on your For You page, and knowing that the shoes we already have will work perfectly fine. Underconsumption is not having a million water bottles on display on your wall, but instead purchasing a new one when your previous one breaks and knowing that you'll be able to use this for years to come. Underconsumption is not feeling pressured to buy an espresso machine, a milk steamer, a milk frother when you've never even tried making coffee at home. Underconsumption is being financially responsible with your purchases, recognizing what you already have at home, repurposing items in different ways than they were intended. Being an underconsumption core queen does not mean that you're never allowed to buy anything else, but it means only buy it if you need it. Only buy it if it can save you some money in the long run. Only buy it if it's something that brings you joy.
So this video is all about embracing underconsumption, being less of a consumer in small ways and taking pride in that, but still being able to have nice things and spend your money when you want to. But some people will say that, you know, isn't underconsumption not buying anything at all? Some people would say that making coffee at home with fancy syrup and $6 creamer isn't really underconsumption, because these are all unnecessary extras. Someone said, I think we have different definitions of poor. The creator replied, what a strange thing to say to someone. That's not underconsumption, that's a normal amount of consumption. The creator replied, yes, that's why I say in the video, it's just the internet's rebranding of existing while poor and on a budget. And somebody replies, the way that you say that reeks of classism. The creator replied, I am poor and on a budget, so I'm allowed to say that. So yeah, it gets a little bit confusing and messy, and then people start calling each other classist. And I am all for sharing experiences and having important conversations in comment sections, but so often on social media, these conversations turn into trying to one-up each other and being defensive and telling each other you're wrong and I'm right, and people start like invalidating other people's life experiences and opinions. Yeah, it's a lot. So then when you get people like this creator who describes themselves as poor and they're choosing to use the underconsumption trend to romanticize their own life and showcase that on social media, you will of course get people in the comments saying, well, you're not really poor if you can afford a $6 coffee creamer. And people will say, your version of poor looks very different to my version of poor. And before you know it, we have completely sidetracked from the purpose of underconsumption content, which is to de-influence people from overconsumption. I do feel like this is a bit of a harsh take, that underconsumption is just another way for rich people to cosplay the poor. I get why some people might feel that way, and don't get me wrong, there are plenty of rich people out there who love to cosplay the poor for the aesthetic, but I feel like, for the most part, underconsumption content is different because there is a greater purpose behind it, and calling it cosplaying the poor completely strips away the original purpose of that content, which is, as I've been saying, to de-influence people from overconsumption. Everyone will feel differently about it, so let me know what you think in the comments. I did see another YouTuber describe Underconsumption Core as a necessary evil, and I do kind of agree with that. It shouldn't have to exist as a trend. And I know that it's weird seeing people making a big deal out of stuff that you already do. I know that from experience. But because of how popular overconsumption content is, we have to combat that somehow. And we can do that by making content where we promote and encourage using what we have. My opinion is of course influenced by the fact that I am a big advocate for anti-overconsumption content. In my eyes, any content that goes against overconsumption content is good and very necessary, but it is important to listen to other people's perspectives and make sure that we aren't causing harm in other ways as we attempt to fight against the overconsumption final bosses. I'll see you next week, guys. Thank you for watching.